Hey, everyone. How are we feeling today? Been a long week. Been a long week. I think the weeks start to get longer as the semester goes on, and so yeah, this one was a particularly long one for me. There's a few more coming up. Yeah, the good news is that this is Friday of week number 10. We have, I think, 5 more Fridays together. Not 5 more weeks together, technically speaking, because there's going to be a few weeks that, or at least one week where we're not going to meet on Monday for class. That's week 14. Just as a kind of some guidelines where we're going from here, since we got a little bit of time today, and everybody's going to be busy downloading Excel samples, data sets, parts, or data set 7, parts 1 and 2. So as we get prepared for that, I just wanted to make sure that we know where we're going. So we've got 3 more chapters to cover. They're going to be chapters 12, 13, and 14, and they're going to be covered, ironically, in chapters 11, 12, and 13. Or sorry, weeks 12, 11, 12, and 13. We will have our next exam in week 14, and then our presentations will be in the final week of the semester. Please remember your introductory topics for your AI research are going to be due on Monday. We're going to do a little bit of work on that today. I'm going to kind of forego the traditional presentation of materials. We're going to talk about some of the things that you can think about. I noticed that only a few people have actually submitted their assignment for Monday, which is fine. It's not a really intense or rigorous activity, but I wanted to give you some ideas or some tips on what you can do moving forward and to kind of make this as easy as possible. That being said, we still have some more Excel stuff to do, so let's go ahead and get started. So for our first Excel activity today, we're going to be dealing Excel dataset 1, and I do want to go ahead and set up a tool on the Excel. We are going to need an add-in for the analysis that we're going to be doing. And as we did last week, we're going to be walking along with the information that's in the book. This is actually a bankruptcy prediction model, which is kind of cool once you figure out what it is you're doing. But we're going to need to actually have histogram functionality enabled in our spreadsheet. So here's what we're going to do. First thing, hopefully you have Excel open. We're going to go to File. We're going to go down to Options. And we need to actually look at the add-ins. And if you look at mine, you'll notice my analysis tool pack is enabled. You probably do not have yours enabled on your computer. And if you do not have it enabled, I'm going to show you how to enable here in just a second. We're going to need that actually for one of our activities we're going to be doing today. I will be honest, it's not all that impressive. What we're going to be doing is not earth-shattering. It's not going to be this incredible visualization, but it's part of the project, and I want to be consistent with what the book says. So down here where it says Manage Excel Add-ins, go ahead and click on this Go button right down here. And you probably have this window pop up. And you have 4 options to check. Yours has probably got all 4 blank. I'd like you to go ahead and click on the analysis tool pack. Now, I am not 100% certain that this is going to work for all the machines. We had a problem with this last semester, which is why it's not currently installed. The analysis tool pack was not working. I checked it both on this machine and on those machines out there a couple days ago to make sure that it was functional. And it looked to be working okay. I'm not going to guarantee it's working. I'm hoping that it's going to work. We'll see what happens. If it doesn't work, then we'll just move on. But I do want to use that if possible. So go ahead and click on that next to analysis tool pack. You don't need to enable anything else, just the analysis tool pack, and go ahead and click OK. All right. So remember last week we talked about how we were going to be doing analysis over descriptive analysis and diagnostic analysis, and those were the easy ones. Descriptive analysis is basically asking a question of what happened. Diagnostic analysis is why did something happen. And even then, when we talked about why something happened, we really didn't answer that question. We basically set the stage for how we could ask the question of why something happened. Now we're moving into a little bit more challenging analytics. We're going to talk about predictive analytics, and then prescriptive analytics will be our next one after this. So for our predictive analytics, we're going to do a bankruptcy prediction model, as the word as the term implies. This is actually developed from a researcher. I believe his name is I believe it's Edward Altman, but I could have the name wrong. And he actually developed, based on financial data, he developed a predictor for whether or not a company will actually see bankruptcy within the coming year. And we're going to do that calculation, and we're going to try to make a determination based on a lot of data. And you probably found this first spreadsheet. There's a lot of records. There's over 2,000 of them. Based on each observation, what is the bankruptcy prediction going to be for each of these? So going back to our book, there's going to actually be several minute steps that we have to walk through. So we're going to be actually creating some ratios based on this information. And this is actually ratios from a database known as CompuStat. If you ever do a financial research, then this is where you will pull the database from. Truman State doesn't have a prescription or a subscription to this, but a lot of organizations do, and you can actually pull financial data for large organizations from this. So the z-score formula, as you can see right here, is just a pretty complex formula that operates on 5 variables, and we're going to actually use these variables to make or set a value for each of these observations. So these are going to be firm year observations, so a particular organization in a given year. And if it's less than 1.8, we're going to say this is going to be a significant risk of bankruptcy in the distress zone. Then if it's between 1.8 and 3, we're going to set at risk of bankruptcy, or if it's greater than 3, it's not risk, or they're not risk of bankruptcy. This is how we predict these items. So let's go ahead and start working through these. So we want to predict which companies will go bankrupt. The formatted data is actually set up for us. All we had to do is input this, and you can see all of the items that we have in the data dictionary. These are the kind of the definitions that come from CompuStat about what these represent. And you can read through these. Some of these are pretty intuitive. ACT is current assets, so assets, current, and then AT is total assets. EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. Some of these are a little bit less intuitive, but for the most part, these are pretty straightforward. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some calculations so we can actually set up our equation. And the first part of this is going to set up pretty easy. We're going to start in cell M1, and we're just going to set the value X1. And I'm starting off with the really difficult stuff. Now, it's actually not that bad. So, and then N1, we're going to say X2, and so on and so forth. X3, X4, X5. Then on R1, we actually need to set up our formula that we're going to be for calculation. So in R1, we're going to type in Altman's Z. And this is the actual formula that we're going to calculate using the other items that we're going to, or using the aggregation of these items we're going to compute here in just a second. All right. So now where things are going to get a little bit dicey is how we actually make the formulas here. So as we say, X1 is a calculation of working capital, but it has to be scaled by total assets. And when I say scaled by total assets, it's basically saying that we want everything to be on the same basis, regardless of the size of the organization. So we divide by a common denominator. So for our X1, we want to have working capital. So does everybody remember working capital from finance classes or from 221? Working capital is just current assets minus current liabilities. That's all we're going to do is we're going to take current assets minus current liabilities and divide by total assets. And you can see the formula here, and I'll try to make this a little bit larger so that everybody can read. Our X1 calculation will be D2 minus G2 over E2. Now, we do need to make sure that we put those in parentheses, those numerator items, because they need to be divided together. So equals D2 minus G2 over E2. And you can go ahead and you can scroll back and see what's being calculated. Again, it's current assets minus current liabilities, and then the aggregate of that is being divided by total assets. By the way, these are scaled numbers. These are numbers, these are numbers in, I believe these are in millions, what they're at right now. And you'll notice X1 is 0.1, and it says the dollar sign, but we're not going to worry about the editing right now. Technically, that's just a ratio, so it's going to be 0.1, not 10 cents. All right, holding that, let's go ahead and go to X2 and look at our formula for that. So remember, X2 is ratio or retained earnings divided by total assets, which is much easier. So this is going to be J2 divided by E2. So X2 is equals J2 divided by E2. We have a negative number there, but it's still in dollar signs, and we'll fix that here in just a second, I promise. I can't leave that way. I'm too OCD to do that. So X3 is going to be earnings before interest and taxes divided by total assets. So another pretty simple one is going to be F2 divided by E2. So then X4 is basically going to be the long-term solvency of the company. So we're going to take market value of stockholders' equity. We're going to divide that by the book value of total debt owed, which again is pretty easy. It's L2 divided by H2. Then finally, we need to do X5. X5 is sales divided by total assets, so K2 divided by A2. All right, so you should have negative 0.11, 0.1, 0.39238 probably, and then 1.96824, which depending on how many decimals. We're going to scale these here in just a second, make them all consistent. So the very first thing, what I'd like for you to do is making sure that you have this line correct, or these numbers correct. If you have these numbers correct, that means your formulas are correct. And the very easy solution is, let's make all of our formulas follow this. So we're just going to flash fill. X5, K2 divided by E2. All right, let's do a little bit cleanup before we move on. Let's highlight columns M through Q. Let's just go ahead and set these all to a consistent type. So we're just going to say number, and let's say 4 decimal places. And you can use thousand separator, what will be relevant, and then you can actually put parentheses on there. However you want to set this up is fine. I just want to make this consistent for everything. So we have consistent presentation across. All right, next step. All right, so basically from this point here, we need to use the Altman Z-score formula. Now, Altman Z-score is a little bit tricky in the fact that not all of our variables that we just calculated have the same weight. Some of these items matter more for bankruptcy than other ones. So we're going to create an equation, but we actually need to add the weights to the equation. You can see the equation right here, 1.2 x1, 1.4 x2, 3.3 x3, 0.6 x4, and then 1.0 x5. So if we look down here, the ultimate Z-score formula is just this formula in Excel, and the parentheses do matter here. So let's go ahead and go through this piece by piece, and I'll be blinking between because I don't remember all of this. So we're going to start out in cell R2. We're going to say equals, and then we're going to open parentheses, 1.2 times M2. Then we're going to add, and we can go back and check this, 1.4 times N2. So we're going to do the same thing. Open parentheses, 1.4 times N2. Then we got 3.3 times O2. See if I can scroll this a little bit further over so I can have that visual a little bit easy enough. All right. Then, just for context, 0.6 times P2. Plus, I believe it's still plus. I don't think any of these are minuses. Yeah, they're all pluses. You can go ahead and put 1 times Q2 if you really want to, but we all know 1 times Q2 is just Q2. So let's just be simple and just put Q2 in there. So 1.2 times M2, 1.4 times N2, 3.3 times O2, 0.6 times P2, and then Q2. All those added together should come with an Altman Z-score of 2.51257. Let's check that against what the book results are. This one's a little bit different because it's rounding to a further decimal place. You may have 0.69. I'm just going to go ahead and set this up the same way format cells. I'm just going to set it to numeric four decimal places. Oops. And then once you have that set up, you can flash fill it. That's how you calculate Altman Z-score, which is actually pretty cool. The problem being is we've got 2,000 items, or over 2,000 items. And the actual usage of this is not going to be very beneficial if we're just looking. So we can kind of see that some of the scores jump out already. We got this Altman Z, the very first one is between 1.8 and 3, which was we said there was a risk zone. We think that it's a possibility of risk, but trying to pick these out of a lineup is going to be difficult. Now we can sort according to order, but the book actually wants us to do something a little bit less intuitive. All right, so let's go ahead, and what I'd like for you to do is go to the data tab And by now you should have this tab or this button called data analysis. This is what we enable to the analysis tool pack. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the data analysis, but we actually need to set some things up before we do that. Okay. So you can start on step 10 here if you're following along the book. And start in T1, we're actually going to type in the word bins. Okay. Which will make sense once we actually get the histogram. So just the word bins. So in T2, we're going to set this number 1.79999. We'll say that, yeah. I don't think it really matters. Just as many, we'll say 4 nines, 1.7 and then 4 nines. Then the next one, we're going to say, this is in T3, 2 point, and then we'll do 5 nines. All right. Now we're actually going to do our histogram. And the bins were important to set up with the histogram because these are actually part of the inputs. So let's go ahead and click on data analysis. And then the option close to the bottom is going to say histogram. Go ahead and click on OK. Now for the input range, we want to specify that we're going to be doing everything that's in column R. Okay. So go ahead. I believe it's R2 through, yeah, it's R1. It actually picks up the R1. Okay, R1 through everything to the end, 2330, R2330. We also need to specify our bin range because this is actually going to specify the parameters for a histogram. So in bin range, make sure you pick up T1 through T3. We do need to specify labels because this is basically saying that we've actually got items in our first row. So in this box right here, click on labels. Then we're just going to create a new worksheet from this. All right, so before we actually go forward and go, okay, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So our input range should be R1 through R2330. Our bin range should be T1 through T3. We should have labels because we do need to specify that R1 and T1 are basically just headers. And we're going to create a new worksheet. So once you have that, I promise this is not going to be all that outstanding, but we'll see why the value is. It's not really impressive, but it's kind of, it's okay. It's okay. Go and click OK. And you will notice we created a histogram. It is a very simple histogram. Okay. All it's telling us is what is the frequency that falls below a certain range. So we've got 305 of our 23, well, like roughly 2,300 items that fall within the range of being bankruptcy risks. Then we have 516 that fall between 1.8 and 3.0, which we say are moderate risk. And then about 1,500 of our 2,300 company year observations are going to be low risk. So what does this mean? Why do we go through this whole rigmarole? Basically, if you were doing a financial analysis at this point, say an investment analysis, and you had all this data, you would use this information to say, which companies would I invest in, which companies would I avoid because I think that there's going to be a bankruptcy risk. These companies right here that have this 1.8 or lower, we're going to stay away from those like the plague. We're going to basically avoid those at all costs. These right here, these are kind of suspect. They may or may not be okay, but this is kind of be one of those better nots. These are the ones that we're probably going to be the most interested in because they have the longevity probability there. So yeah, that's going to be our prescriptive analysis or our predictive analysis. But we do have one more. We do have a prescriptive analysis. So get over to 7.2 now. Go ahead and set the book again. So everybody remember break-even point from 221? Calculation of break-even point. I'm not saying could you go up the calculator right now. It's like I'm not going to ask you to do questions on break-even point. But just remember the rough concept. The idea being is that how many units do we need to sell in order for our cost to actually exactly equal our revenues? Where basically our cost and our revenues net out to be zero. We have $0 of income, exactly. We're going to do some analysis on that, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to have Excel do some of the solutions for us. So our step here is to figure out how can we actually use Solver in Excel to the break-even point, which is basically what level of sales will allow us to break even. So we can see what our data dictionary is here. This is pretty easy. This is a fairly straightforward concept. So we got price of items, units of sales, units of cost, fixed cost, variable cost, total cost, net income, which hopefully you remember enough from 221 to remember what all these cost relationships are, because we're going to be setting up those relationships here. So let's go ahead and do our calculations for how we calculate variable cost, total cost, sales revenue, and net income. All right. So variable cost. Variable cost is pretty straightforward in the fact that we've got a variable unit cost listed right here, and we've got our units of sales. So if I take B3 and multiply it times B4, that should give me variable cost, right? 1350. All right. Next one, we're going to do total cost. All right. Total cost, what was the function of total cost back when we learned in 221, okay? It's just fixed cost plus variable cost. That gives us our total cost. So let's just go ahead and take fixed cost, add it to total cost. As you're going to see, these are going to be all functions of one another, which is why this will work out for us. Then we're going to calculate sales revenue of the product. Now, it doesn't give us sales revenue in the problem that we're working through, but we do know the price per unit and the number of units sold. So we can calculate revenue pretty easily. Take B2 times B3 gives us sales revenue of 2100. And then we're going to calculate income. And of course, income is just revenue minus cost. Revenue minus cost. Which unhappy conclusion, we've got net income of negative 250 if we did everything properly. Which is not good for us, okay? We don't want to actually have that. Now let's go ahead, copy this across the remaining months. So we have our calculations for all those months. We're going to be using those floating cell references or the relative cell references to our benefit. Now what I'd like to know is what sales volume do I need for each of these observation months to make these zero, to make these values equal zero. And we can do this manual calculation because we've done it before. Everybody's done this in the previous class before. But what if we actually have a cell do it for us? And the funny part is I didn't intentionally say that, but we're actually going to be using what if analysis. Okay. So let's go ahead and go over the data tab. And what we're going to do is we're going to do something called goal seek. And you can see the description on goal seek is saying find the right input for the value that we want. So basically, we have a belief that this is what our values are going to be for the month of January. So we know what the prediction is. We're trying to make a determination, how do we need to change sales, or how do we need to change sales so that we can actually have this be zero, which is going to be our prescriptive analysis. So let's go to goal seek. Now in the goal seek, you will notice it specifies we're going to set cell B9, which is going to be our unit of sales. Because remember, when we talked about break-even analysis back in 221, we were saying, how many units do we have to sell to achieve a certain break-even point? So set cell is going to be B9. Sorry, our B9, so yeah, it's not our unit cell. So B9, we want to set it to 0. Because remember, break-even by definition is net income equals 0. How are we going to fix that? We're going to change cell B3, our units of sales. And if we click OK, Excel is going to do some manipulation for us. It's basically going to kind of trial and error. It's going to say, all right, by changing this to 400, we now equal 0. And this works because we've actually fixed our inputs in here, our values in here, to where these mathematically change to fix net income. Now, the good news is we can do this for every month. The bad news is this is not a copy and paste function that we can do for every month, okay? Just because I set this up does not mean that I can copy this over now. It's just going to give us the same formulas. All that happened is Excel changed this manually for us. So if we're going to do goal seek for every month, we have to do this manually. So let's just do this for a few months on your own. Do goal seek for February, March, and April and see if we can come up with the same values. you really want to overachieve and do it for every single month, that's absolutely fine. I'm not giving you any extra credit for doing every single month, but you can kind of see the pattern is in the first few months. So how about that? It's pretty nice. So can you imagine trying to actually have this for back in 221, you were doing break-even point, it would have been much easier, right? How many people had Dr. Atera for 221? There is 0% chance she would have allowed you to do that in that class, okay? What about Dr. Deers? Dr. Deers, maybe. Dr. Shanewa? Trevor would have been just kind of like, yeah, let's get into it. Let's do it right away. Shame that he's gone. All right, shame that he's gone. Okay, so this is our prescriptive analysis. We've now gone for 4 analysis types. Again, it's important to keep in mind what the objective of each of these were and what it is we eventually did according to that. These were fairly simple and straightforward tasks, but they actually provide value in the long term about what it is that you can use Excel for. And even though this analysis were pretty straightforward and we walked through them pretty easily, you should actually get an understanding of why these actually have value for these particular areas of analysis that we've looked at. Anyway, there will be a revisitation of this on the exam, by the way. I will ask you about these specific tasks that we did over the past 2 weeks. So please make sure you're clear on why each of these was each type of analysis, because they actually align to each one. So make sure you understand what we did for the descriptive analysis, for the diagnostic analysis, and what we did today for the predictive analysis and prescriptive analysis, and you can actually explain that in detail. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing for AI. So as I said today, what I'd like to do for AI is I'd like to do something that's going to allow you to work a little bit on your own today. We've had some structured assignments. So the first thing I want to point out, and this came up in a different class, but I want to make sure that we're very, very clear on this, okay? One thing that we're going to talk about here in just a second is we're going to talk, oops, where the heck is that? Sorry, I know it's in the syllabus. I've just got to find it where it is. At least I thought it was in here. Apparently, I forgot to completely forgot to put the AI statements in here. Okay. All right. Something I've just learned is that my syllabus is completely missing my statement on AI. All right. It's time to write. Okay. It's time to write. No. All right. So I wanted to talk about the statement on AI before we actually talked about the AI tools today. So normally I have this statement in my syllabus, and apparently I just forgot to do it this semester, and nobody came and threw the hammer down on me. So one of the things we're about to talk about is we're going to talk about how can we use the AI tool to do the work for us. And I am not against this. I am very much one of the peoples in the camp of working smarter rather than harder, all right? So you'll notice your assignment is a 1 to 2 page document. And people who are not familiar with AI are going to say, well, that means I've got 1 to 2 pages to write, and that's a lot of work. I have never put any emphasis on saying that you had to be the one to write that 1 to 2 pages. If you want to create your project and have Excel document this for you, or Excel, your AI tool document this for you, that is certainly within the parameters. What I was going to point out on the syllabus that's currently missing, so where I'm going to make this announcement now so that everybody knows, if you use an AI tool in that nature, you need to be very transparent about what it is that you used it for, okay? So as we start working through these projects, and as we start working through the final assignment, you need to be very clear about what it is that you did in AI. And that's not saying that you have to document every single step of the process. But say, for example, on Monday, when you submit your AI research and you had AI write the write-up for you, you basically gave it a prompt and how to write the write-up for you. You need to be very transparent, very clear about in your write-up saying, I had ChatGPT or I had Copilot prepare this write-up for me. It is a summary. I have checked this to make sure it's consistent with what the work that I want to perform, that you have to review it. So you do need to document, you can document this using the AI tool, but you do need to document exactly what you did with the AI tool. And it's just going to be important for that guideline to be kept. I actually have this as a pretty standard syllabus statement. I'm a little bit embarrassed that I don't have this in the syllabus right now, particularly as relevance, high relevance to this particular topic. I'm probably going to fix that in between now and the next class period to make sure we have that documented down. But what do I mean about what it is we're going to be doing? So at this point, you all have a very good idea of how to prompt the AI tool for the information that you're looking for. And I would say that probably before you came into this course, you probably had a fairly good idea. Something I've been finding when working with the students is this generation has a much stronger utilization capacity for AI tools than my generation or even generations subsequent to mine. So that's a good thing. That means that you are very familiar on what you can and cannot use AI tools for. So the next step is you've got a research project that's due on Monday. So what do you want to be doing for this research project? You want to be identifying what's interesting to me. How can I actually have the AI tool help me with this? And then can I have what work can I have the AI tool do? And the short answer is the AI tool can do 99% of the work in this particular project. In fact, I would encourage you to try to make the AI tool do as much work as possible. So going back to our first discussion, I know it's been several months, like a month and a half since we had our first discussion. But remember, one of the things that we talked about with prompt engineering is saying that you have to be specific about what it is that you're trying to accomplish with the AI tool. You have to tell the AI tool who it is that they're trying to be. So when you start working on this prompt, and again, this is going to be a free-form prompt, one of the very first things I'd like for you to do is I'd like you to give the parameters to the tool exactly what it is that your position is. You can say, I am a student in a junior level accounting course that's working on technology for use in accounting and business careers. I'm trying to identify what I can use an AI tool for personal interest. What are some topic areas that I can actually talk about that would be that I'd be able to select from? It will come up with a list of topics, and you'll say, "Is this good enough?" You will actually say, "I'd like to learn more about," and you can kind of see the thread that's going to be going through here. One of the goals here is to be able to identify something that's personally interesting to you, but you have to put minimal amount of work into. Okay, how many people are fans of this idea of minimal amount of work? I am too. Okay, I'm not going to lie. If you go and talk to your instructors and they say, "I am really a fan of a lot of work," they're lying. Okay, no instructor is going to sit here and tell you that they want a lot of work. If you do minimal amount of work, that's fine. I'm not going to get offended by that, but I want it to be for a purpose. So it needs to be identified about what it is that you're trying to do and who it is that's going to accomplish this. And the tool is going to do most of the work for you, but you need to provide a sufficient guidance. So the next steps that we're going to be walking through is we're going to be saying, how do we set up the prompts so the AI knows that it's representing me and my interests? And then every step thereafter, you're going to provide critiques based on exactly who you are and what the AI tool needs to do. Now, remember in our prompts before, we said the AI tool can critique its own work. If it comes up with a list and you say, okay, I'm not sure, there's a lot of things that I like about that list, you can say, what are some pros and cons about the list that you provided to me? And you can provide some more items that are possibilities within this area. You can have it identify it. You can have it do free format criticism. It doesn't necessarily need to be prose or extemporaneous discussion of that. You can actually have it provide a table of the pros and cons listed next to each other. You can provide quantitative ratings. However you want to set this up, it's up to you. Ultimately, what you're going to be trying to identify is what is a topic that's cool and interesting to you that seems to be relevant to AI. If it's something about generating AI images for visualizations, that's fine, okay? If it's something about how can AI help you with your homework in a way that's not going to cheat and defeat the entire purpose of homework assignments, that's something that you could talk about. If it's something just personally interesting to say, how can AI actually help me with analysis of, I don't know, maybe you're a big sports fan and you want to do fantasy football analysis and that's personally interesting to you. As long as you can provide some sort of context in which that's actually an educational boon, which I think that there's a lot of argument for that, you can do that too. There is no limitation on this, but you do have to put sufficient analysis in there. One or two prompts is not going to do it. Not asking the AI tool just a very general question, you need to be very, very specific. So what I'd like for you to do over the next few minutes is I'd like for you to work on your prompts that were based on everything that we've talked about before, okay? Again, be specific as to who you are, what your setting is, what it is you want to actually develop from the prompt, and then when you receive your first prompt, critique it. Go crazy on the critiques. Be as brutal as you possibly can to try to summarize and filter out things that are not relevant to you. Once you get that relevant filter, then you can start giving the AI prompts about how it is that you want to develop that research paper that's going to be due on Monday. If you'd like to write the write-up yourself, that's fine, okay? I think that you're going to find that this is going to be something that you can actually leverage AI very effectively. One of the most important things, though, is make sure that you keep very close track about what it is that you're asking the AI tool to do, because you are responsible, you personally, not the AI tool, you are responsible for dictating what exactly you use the AI for in this particular project. That is part of the submission criteria for a Monday. All right? Any questions? Yes.
Yes. I guess should we just like submit what we ask the AI like on a base like cited page, almost just like a oh hey prompt and generate prompt page, or
that would actually be sufficient if you wanted to actually keep the if you wanted to hold the work as an appendix and not include that in there, saying okay here's all the prompts that we made for that project and include that. That's fine. I would like a general statement of saying that I use the AI tool for idea generation. I used it to help dictate my paper. Again, keep in mind that you do have to do some work here. You do have to do some review of the AI work. We talked about a lot of context about AI tools can hallucinate. You cannot accept information that's just at face value. You do have to review the paper and make sure it's consistent. Also, if you do use the AI tool for research purposes, please check your citations, okay? Do not just accept citations. If you want a really, really bad story, go talk to Professor Templeton about the law brief that occurred a few years ago. I think I told the story in here, legal brief, and he'll tell you about how AI tools can completely make stuff up, all right? So keep that in mind. There's no requirement for this research paper that you use references or direct citations. That's not a requirement of the project. But if you want to do that, just so you can have context, please look up those citations to make sure they're legit. All right, good question. Any other questions? All right, go nuts, guys.